that kind of day today. Hi everyone. I've been looking forward to making this video for like a few weeks now, but I just kept losing the motivation or just not finding enough time because this is kind of like the first video that I've like scripted or like planned to this extent. Usually I just sit and talk, but so a lot of you guys on Instagram, I put up a poll last week about whether you wanted to see my topic video or how I moved from beginner to intermediate, and most of you guys wanted to see, like, actually it was kind of like 50-50, but this video had a bit more views. So today I'm going to talk about how I went from a beginner Korean learner to a intermediate Korean learner. So I've got some notes here, so if you see me like peek down, it's because I don't remember what I was supposed to say next, and yeah, and it's really hot, and I have to turn my aircon off while I film because it's too noisy. So if you see me keep doing this, it's because my hair is sticking to my neck because I'm sweaty. Today in Korea, it's 28 degrees Celsius, but it feels like 31 and the humidity is like 70%, so I'm just dead. And I just had to go get the COVID test because of like all of the hagwon outbreaks in Korea right now. I mean, my school asked us to go, but also I kind of like knowing just in case, but yeah. Okay, so let's jump into it. Alright, so first thing is I wanted to explain like my initial interest in studying Korean, and basically I discovered like Korean through the show Running Man. My best friend back in Canada was really into Running Man, and so she kind of introduced it to me and showed it to me, and then I learned about like Korean and like idols and like famous people in Korea, and then I kind of became obsessed. Not with Korea, but with the language. Just something about it kind of struck me as really like beautiful and really interesting. I really wanted to learn. I tried to learn 2 times, but I didn't really get past learning Hangul, so it was kind of like, it took about a year for it to stick with me. So I tell people that I started studying Korean in February 2018 because that's when I really started and then kept going. So from there I've come from a basic beginner up to a probably mid-intermediate. Speaking is probably low intermediate, but reading and writing is definitely mid-intermediate now. So yeah, so I've been posting on my Korean Instagram for many years now, like 3 years, sharing my Korean learning journey with you guys. So yeah, that's basically where you can see all my documented stuff. I'm gonna make this kind of short because I kind of want to make like separate reviews and stuff like that. So the first thing I started using was howtostudykorean.com. I live on a really small island in Canada. Shipping for Korean books was like 3 times the price of the actual book, so more than Yuda on Instagram, my pretty Julia friend, she suggested howtostudykorean.com for me, and I basically for like 6 months I just used that. I went from lesson 0 all the way to like level 3 lesson something, and through that I learned basic grammar, I learned pronunciation, Hangul. There's like, they have like audio tracks so you can like listen. So that around the 6-month mark I switched to, well, I didn't switch, but I added Talk to Me in Korean. So I started from their very first podcast and worked my way up to level 4 before I kind of stopped using it. I would listen to those podcasts on the bus on my way to university or my breaks at work, and then when I would come home I would write the notes and kind of listen again to review. I also watched a lot of Korean 언니 videos. I really like her little vlogs where she goes out and kind of just talks about things in Korean, and some of her phrases and stuff. I learned a lot of common phrases from her as well. Then about a year into studying Korean, I brought in, so I only have the intermediate one right now, but I started using Korean Grammar in Use. I still love these books, but when I use the beginner book, I kind of use it as a main textbook. So I started at chapter 1 and went all the way to the end. But now I just use it as a review. So when I review Vitamin Korean, I just find the grammar points that were in Vitamin Korean chapter, and I just review with it. And then something else I started doing in about my 1-year mark of studying Korean is I started reading webtoons. They were really hard, they didn't make much sense, but I really liked them, and so I read through all of the updated Yoshin Kangnim, right? True Beauty or whatever it is in English. And yeah, I learned a lot of vocab and kind of funny phrases and stuff like that from there. So that's what I used until I got to an intermediate level. I'm gonna make another video about what I used to study at my current intermediate level in the future. Part 3, my method. So how I studied. This could be very long. I'm gonna try and not make it that long, and then I might just upload a study tip video for beginners later where I can talk more about it, because I want to include the Q&A part here as well, which is already quite long. I filmed it yesterday. Okay, so first for writing, I wrote everything, sample sentences. I wrote, if I was doing a lesson of how to study Korean, they can have kind of a lot of sample sentences. I would write every single one. It got me used to interacting with the grammar. It got me used to interacting with the vocab. I find that at the beginner stage, getting used to writing, physically writing the language, is also really important, because it's not like a Roman script, so it can be a little unfamiliar for beginners, and in my opinion, the quicker you can write, the better. So I would write everything, every sample sentence. So I think this is good for reading, vocabulary, and your physical writing. Next thing I did is journal writing. So I started writing a Korean journal in the first week of learning Korean. This is my very first Korean journal entry. It's horrible. You can pause to read. I think I've hidden it from my Korean Instagram because it was pretty bad. And then I just wrote. I only knew 2 grammar structures. I knew no vocab, but I just started writing. And so through that, I was able to kind of interact with the language. Where I lived, there was really no Korean population. And I was too beginner to really start talking to Koreans on Hello Talk or something. So I think writing a diary is super good. And when you're at the beginner level, you don't need to write a super detailed feeling-filled journal. You can just write today I got coffee, today I went to school. Just writing these sentences in different ways with different vocab will really help solidify that grammar in your head. Just make sure you get corrections, because if you start using that grammar wrong and you never get it corrected, it's gonna be really hard to break that habit later down the road. Another thing I did at a beginner was I started immersing myself really early. Like I said, I watched a lot of Running Man. Sometimes the newer episodes didn't have subtitles, so I would just watch them with no subtitles because I wanted to see the new episodes. And so by doing that, even if you can't understand everything, you can kind of make a lot of inference, especially because they use a lot of the same phrases and vocabulary over and over, especially like during like certain games and stuff like that. So even just hearing it and like getting used to it, it kind of just trains your ear. So if you don't want to sit down and study one day, just watch a video. Like, it doesn't matter. A lot of people I see on Instagram are really obsessed with the idea of 100% comprehension when doing immersion. And I think that's why people are so scared of immersion. I have to make a whole video on this. Really, I have to make a whole video on this. Like, I want to talk about how my Korean improved 100 times faster when I stopped studying just with a textbook. And my last like method thing is I'm obsessed with reviewing. Even now at an intermediate level, I think review is so important. I think we don't review enough because, like, I get it. You're learning a new language, and especially at the beginner level, you're learning really fast. The learning curve is really high. So that's how I review. But I think especially at a beginner level where you're not getting a lot of immersive content to solidify and like consolidate what you've learned, I think review is really important. I used to go to university, and on the bus I would have my like Korean notebook with me, and I would just open it and just read through my notes. If I was home, I would just speak the sentences out loud. And then what I would do, which kind of ties in with writing a diary, I would write a list of grammar structures that I would just reviewed. And then I would try and write a journal entry that used all of them. And then if I figured out that I struggled to use one, then I would review it again. So yeah, I think review is really important. Yeah, so make sure you're reviewing, make sure you're immersing, and that's how I studied as a beginner. It took me about 2 years to get from like high beginner to like comfortably intermediate. But yeah. So that's it for my methods and materials. Like, I really didn't use a lot of different materials. I think that can be really distracting to a beginner. And like, I know I might get hate for saying this, but right now Instagram is kind of obsessed with owning things. You should stick to 1 or 2 resources and kind of go through them wholly and then add in like a sprinkle of other things. But try to vary. Like, don't buy like 7 of the same level grammar books, just different like companies. Like, 1 grammar book, 1 kind of like workbook or like reference book, like Korean grammar in use, and then like something for reading. Like Yonsei has reading books, and they're kind of leveled off with their grammar books as well. Those are a really great way to get some immersion and practice your grammar. So yeah, I've talked a lot, so let's jump into our Instagram Q&A. Okay, so I'm filming this in 2 different parts. My aircon's on right now. You can probably hear it. It's gonna turn off in a second, but it's like 33 degrees in Korea today, at least in my part. But yeah, so it's in 2 parts. So if my makeup changes, my hair changes, or anything like that, just ignore it. I have to make filming work for my work schedule, which is very busy right now. So I thought that I would answer some questions that I got from my question sticker the other day. And so yeah, let's go. First, Rose studied Korean. Hey Rose, one of my good friends in Korea. She asked how to stay motivated when it gets harder. And this was really hard for me because I think at one point when I was going from like low intermediate, it got really difficult and I felt like I wasn't retaining anything. So I didn't study for like a month. So I do suggest giving yourself breaks, but not too long. A month was a little bit much for me. So I recommend maybe a week, 2 weeks to just study or not study. Just don't put pressure on yourself. One thing I do recommend is actually during that break time, try to immerse yourself in things you love about the language. So during my month break, I watched a lot of Korean TV, I listened to a lot of Korean music, I kind of did things like that to try and just keep the language in my head every day, but I didn't actively study. And as I said earlier, I think actively studying as a beginner is kind of important. But as you get into the more harder stuff, I think it's okay to take slightly longer breaks, maybe 1 week, 2 week. And yeah, just make sure you're doing something in the language every day or two so that you're not forgetting everything. Next one, what I study said, how has your study method changed over the years? If it has changed, and it's definitely changed. When I was in beginner level, I relied heavily on textbooks and like YouTube videos, like YouTube lesson videos. But as I kind of approached intermediate ground and really broke into the intermediate level, I went a lot more immersion based. You guys saw my language learner bookshelf, which I will link up there. And I buy a lot of Korean novels. So I read a lot in Korean, whether it be the signs around me when I go out, it could be like a novel, webtoon, things like that. So I rely a lot on reading for my vocabulary acquisition and my grammar reinforcement. These are very important things for me now to be learning, because intermediate and more advanced level Korean is kind of dry. It's very boring in my opinion. So when I sit down with an intermediate textbook like my Vitamin Korean 4 book, I find that I can get a little bored with studying. So yeah, I definitely rely a lot more on immersion. I read more, I listen more, I write more. I find that writing's a really underappreciated language learning technique because it can be hard. But yeah, so I definitely don't use textbooks as much as I used to, and I don't regret it. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. I still feel like I'm learning a lot, just I don't have to sit and go through a textbook start to finish to feel like I'm improving. Next one, Sky Hey said how to be consistent, and this is kind of you have to put a lot of responsibility on yourself in this aspect. You can't just expect the motivation and determination to come to you every single day. So you can get lazy. You can lapse into periods where, like, if you don't feel like studying, you will just kind of be lazy and you won't study. So how I combat that is that if it's a day where I feel like I don't want to study, I'll pick up a book. I'll be lazy in bed and I'll watch Korean YouTube videos with no subtitles because I need to improve these ears. And you have to put the pressure on yourself to study if you want to be consistent. But just find things that are more fun to study than just making yourself go through a textbook. And another thing, if you are big on textbooks and you're at a beginner level that you kind of can't use too much immersive material, what I suggest is maybe switching up your resources. So I think you should stick to one textbook as your main source, but there are various other reading textbooks, listening textbooks that have different kinds of lessons and different kinds of activities that you can do to kind of break up the monotony. So maybe check out some of the non-grammar Talk to Me in Korean books like these ones. They have conversation for beginners and intermediates. So you can like do some conversation practice. You can talk to yourself in the mirror with them. They've got these great exercises where you can like listen to a dialogue, shadow the dialogue, things like this. They also have things like the news in Korean, which is a little bit of a more intermediate level, but still something you could try. You could read neighbor webtoons. I'll put a list of my recommended easier webtoons, so you can check it here. And yeah, so like just force yourself is all I can say. There's been days where I just didn't want to touch Korean, and sometimes I let those days just go, but other days I say, no, Katherine, you have to like listen to something, you have to at least read something. So I resort to smaller things that I can do in smaller chunks, and that's a little different from my like main routine study. Next question, best vegan lemon cake. That sounds delicious. Please give me the best vegan lemon cake. I love lemon cake. So how many times a week you studied? Have you had a job, school to combine with? Yes. I've been working straight since I was 15 years old. I'm 26 now. I've never not had a job since then. But when I started studying Korean in 2018, I actually was working 35 to 40 hours a week and doing a 4-class course load at university. So I definitely had to balance that. And the way I did that is just finding pockets of time where I could study. So when I went to university, when I went to campus, I would always have my Korean notebook with me. And at that time I was learning on howtostudykorean.com, and through that I was able to access it on my phone or on one of the university computers. And I would just, like if I was waiting to get the bus home or like something like that, I would just like pop open my notebook and do a quick lesson on my phone. So definitely use those small times where you're just kind of waiting or like commuting and things like that. They will give you that little opportunity to work language study into your everyday routine. And typically when I was a beginner, I was studying about I want to say 3 to 4 days a week, maybe 5 if it was a slower like coursework week. That wasn't like a motivation thing. It's just because I really, really loved studying Korean at the beginner level. So I was like addicted to it. Any free time I had, I would study Korean. So yeah. Let's see. Next question. Study Read Love says, maybe what methods you use and how you kept going. So methods are in the first part of the video. And I've also kind of addressed like being in a slump and how you kind of have to force yourself or make it more fun in a different way. And how I kept going was just constantly putting myself in situations where I would receive validation. I think validation is very important as a language learner. Put yourself out there in a atmosphere where you can learn language, use language, and then get like validation, like comments or like compliments. Hello Talk has a really cool like moments feature. It's kind of like a Facebook timeline, so you can like post like a little status and people will comment, and so that's how I kept going when I felt a little demotivated, because every time one Korean person said like wow, you speak Korean so well, wow, you write so well, stuff like that, like it would just give me like all the serotonin and I would just be like, okay, one person said I'm good, I have to get better. So that's how I kept going. Next question, Bailey Studies said, how did you know when you reached the intermediate stage? For me, it was when I felt because maybe my situation is different because I live in Korea, but for me, when I could kind of follow along with a conversation out in public, or I could start to do things out in public by myself, that's when I felt a little bit more close to intermediate, and when I could start understanding more, like, I want to say novels, but not everyone reads novels. But I read my first novel start to finish maybe 1 year ago, and at that point, like, I could confidently say that, like, I felt like I was intermediate. So, but maybe I should make a whole other video on, like, how to know when you're intermediate or something like that, because it's kind of, I could talk for a very long time. M and I said, any specific strategies for remembering vocabulary long term? Again, immersion. Read, use it, just use it and consume it. Otherwise, you will have your brain won't want to remember it because you just read it, tried to study it, and then never used it. So, like, why would you keep it? Let's see, let's do one more question. Here's a good one. KCC96, aka one of my great friends here in Korea, Kendra, said, how fluent is Ducky? Ducky is my dog who is, I don't know if you can see, he's sleeping in the bed behind me, and Ducky is totally fluent in Korean. All of his commands and tricks are in Korean. So he knows 앉아, 손, 기다려. He does 누워, so like lie down. He does like 일로 와, 안돼. So if you don't know, my boyfriend is Korean and the dog is ours. So during like the very early puppy stages, my boyfriend was working from home due to like some changes at his workplace. And so all of his training got done in Korean. So it's hard when my foreign friends try to get to do tricks with him because I have to tell them what Korean words. He does know like the English version of some words, like if I say 앉아 or if I say sit, he'll do both. But he responds better to the Korean words. I think that's all for questions. So I do have more, there is more questions. I couldn't actually answer them all because it's kind of like, it's kind of a lot. But I think I will make another video soon about like how to really like boost your level and how things I did to boost my level to like up past the intermediate into slightly higher. 봐주셔서 감사합니다. 구독과 좋아요 눌러주세요. 네, 다음에 봐요.